Okay, so welcome everyone. I really appreciate you being here. And for those of you who sent me questions in advance, super excited that that's why we're recording, so I can answer your questions. I'm Lisa Witherow. If you haven't met me before, I am the owner of the DNA Advantage, and I do research for health and DNA to really personalize our approach for health. So, with that, I will jump right in. And again, if you have any questions at all, if you are listening to the replay and you have questions, you're welcome to message me directly, or you can certainly ask if you're on the call right now. And you can either post it in the chat or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. So one of the first questions was, how can DNA tell you about anxiety? And what is interesting is DNA is a part of what we learn about ourselves. So what's great about that is that it's telling us more about why we're experiencing a particular symptom than it is our current status. So we need to look at the landscape to understand the status. We need to understand what current symptoms we're dealing with, and we can understand better from our labs what we're dealing with, and then even our past, looking at our family history and our personal health history to understand what is the trend. Do we typically have anxiety at a certain time of day, a certain time of year, or is it triggered by a particular event or something that's going on in our lives? So all of those things compiled are the external factors that give us information that tell us then where to look in our DNA. So there have been times where I've had clients tell me that they have a child that has anxiety, as an example. And so they don't really know what that child is experiencing internally, but they can tell by the external factors and the lab work and things like that. And even just when the child gets old enough to really explain that they feel scared or nervous, or they don't want to be around people, that those are the signals. So when you think about anxiety, there are some key areas that I would look then in DNA. We look beyond just the landscape, we look into the DNA to understand if there are issues with histamine, as an example. That's why I mentioned if there's a certain time of year or certain event that you're exposed to, or element that you're exposed to that could trigger anxiety, that's where we start to look at uh, histamine and get a sense of whether histamine is not managed as well by the body. And looking at genetics, we can better understand that. We can also look at our neurotransmitters and the genes that are linked to managing our neurotransmitters, because when we have too much serotonin or too much dopamine and our bodies aren't leveraging that and using it appropriately, it can flood our system and stay there at heightened levels and cause anxiety. So that's a really important thing to look at. And then of course there's glutamate to GABA. If we don't convert our glutamate to GABA appropriately, GABA is very calming and glutamate is excitatory. So that's another area. And then there are others, but just to give you an idea, and I don't know if this person that asked the question is actually experiencing anxiety or if it's a family member, but being able to get a sense of, even if there isn't DNA testing done yet, looking at the landscape of when it occurs and when does it get worse, when does it get better, and really start to move toward the signals and listening to the signals of your body, and then doing DNA testing to see what that root cause is. So I do have other questions that people have posed, but does anyone else who's here today have any questions? Because I can jump, right into your question, or I can just continue going through. I have about 4 or 5 more questions that I have posed already, but I'm happy to answer your questions because you get priority. You're live. And I do have one person on I just saw who asked a question in advance too. So I will get to her question in a moment. Is there anybody that wanted to jump on while you have a quiet background or anything to ask?
Feeling the symptoms related to menopause. Thankfully, not so much of the hot flashes, just warm flashes, but like the fog, the the weight, that things like that. Do you have
Okay.
any suggestions?
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's a great question because when we think about our hormones, we assume that, they're there for obviously a reason. They're there to support us through certain times of our lives. And then when they start to fall off, our bodies go through a process of adjustment, we'll call it. Other people call it hell. But what I would say is when it comes right down to it, understanding when you have the hot flashes or even sleep issues or response, irritability, all of those things that go with it, weight gain, it's really understanding your body and when did things change. Is it something that you can see that you feel hungrier and that your uh, satisfaction of meals, you eat a little bit more because your satisfaction is low. All of those things give us hints, and then certainly we can leverage um, certain techniques to support us in addressing it, like drinking water before a meal if you're not feeling satisfied, eating a little bit earlier in the evening, and not eating a lot of like high sugar, high carb items for dinner if you're having trouble sleeping. Things like that, that we're negotiating at this point with our bodies because we know changes are definite. We're going through a lot of changes during that time. Now, the one thing I will say with from a DNA perspective that's really valuable is being able to understand how we process our estrogen as an example, because estrogen is what very often is blamed for all of these lovely symptoms. And there's estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone that are all involved. We want to make sure that we are paying attention to how our body handles those hormones. And if we have a source, let's say that we might even be supplementing with hormones, we need to make sure that we have an exit strategy for those hormones, because if we don't, we can run into serious problems with our detoxification pathways, not eliminating the byproducts of estrogen, let's say, and it can cause a backup and can cause some issues. So what I would say is we really want to understand our bodies. We want to understand which of our hormones, well, excuse me, which of our symptoms are most bothersome and what we need to do. When did they start? And what we can do on a daily basis to adjust. If you have a really good day that you feel like, gosh, I haven't had any of my symptoms, write down, reflect on what you've done, whether it's what you've eaten, your sleep schedule, if you've taken any supplements, drinking more water, not drinking caffeine or eating chocolate. I know it's counterintuitive, but for some people, I've seen that chocolate, especially later in the evening, can actually cause hot flashes for some people. Again, it's different for everyone. And I'm not saying chocolate is off limits, but the timing that we eat it or the timing that we drink caffeine, all of these things are really, really important, especially when the system is super sensitive. When all of those changes are occurring. So I do look, individually, I do one-on-one sessions, even if it's just a one-off session to kind of give strategies to look at what can we do as a improvement strategy, not necessarily with DNA. If you haven't done DNA, we don't have that information, but you can look at that as a stepping stone to say, let's reflect on when we're having these issues and how we can address it. So I'm happy to talk with you about that. And sometimes I even have group sessions. If I find that there are enough people who are interested in the same topic, sometimes it's great to have a group topic and a group discussion to go over that, because it's very individualized, but it can be very helpful to hear what other people are doing and strategies that have either worked or have failed, and getting a sense of what we've tried and collectively, come to terms with how we can personalize it for ourselves. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, really looking at what your key symptom is that you want to address is really helpful, because it can feel overwhelming no matter what we're dealing with. It can feel overwhelming when we're not sure how to jump in and really, like, what do I fix first? And sometimes those discussions can help that determination too, because gosh, we're all over the place when we have symptoms and we don't know where to begin. Sometimes it's, just really identifying what's bothering us most and then zooming into that and see, have I ever had a better day or a better week with this particular symptom, and what did I do differently? So that would be, one way to jump in there and make a change.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. So another question I have, and I know, yeah, she's on right now. I'm not eating much, but I drink Ensure every morning. Should I drink two? Okay, so again, this is very individualized, because what I would want to know is, what is the overall nutrition throughout the day? So I'm going to look at the full panel of input that we have throughout the day. I want to make sure that there are whole foods, fruits and vegetables. If there's any kind of challenge with digestion, we, be very sensitive to that. If you know that there's a particular food group that you're sensitive to, then we want to be careful. But when you could even make smoothies if you need to break it down a little bit. You can cook the food a little bit and make a soup to make it more digestible. So where I run into a little bit of a challenge with Ensure, and let's see, I was going to look at the ingredients here. Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with a few drawbacks with Ensure. And it's ironic, because I used to do some consulting for Abbott Labs years ago, and not when it comes to nutrition, but other training and development work. But they used to have corn syrup and things like that in it. They have since shifted away from that mostly. But there's still sugar is, I think, the third ingredient, which is not great. Um, and then, of course, you need to make it palatable. So I do understand. But you also have dairy in most of the formulas, and dairy can be a bugger for some people. It can be very inflammatory. And then we have artificial additives like folate or folic acid instead of folate. And then the B12 is also artificial. It is cyanocobalamin. And there are some other nutrients that are added in the bottom of the list that are very likely artificial, because they're cheaper, and it's just sometimes easier to integrate into those mixes sometimes. But the point is, what I would suggest is rather than drinking two of those, I would say if you have to drink one in the morning to get your day started, that's fine. But let's get some whole foods into your diet. And if we need to either cook them to get them pre-digested a little bit, or do a smoothie, something like that. I have a a superfood smoothie class that I'm going to be doing in the near future. If you're interested in that, definitely attend that because it's all about finding the right proteins and then the superfoods that can really support you with energy and vitality and get your body going. So that would be another option. Getting the soups and the foods into your diet that can really give you sustenance and give you good nutritional value. There's not a lot of good nutritional value in Ensure, despite their theory of meal replacement. We can all appreciate that anything in a can or a little pouch is going to be so when it comes to actual nutrition. So that would be my answer for that. Hopefully that helps a little. And we can go into if you want to have a one-on-one or if we want to do a session where you even ask me questions in direct messages. I'm happy to give you some ideas and some, if you can give me some more details. Anybody else have a question before I go to another request that I had previously? Not yet? Okay. Jump in if you have any questions. Okay. When is it appropriate to do DNA testing for a child? So I don't feel there's any limitation to when the DNA testing can be done. It really is about um, it's about what you need to know about your child. So typically, children, if they're not having any symptoms, a lot of people are not that concerned about what their DNA is, unless there are either symptoms or if there is a family history that they're concerned about. So, young children, when there's a family history of an illness and you want to know what kind of strategy would be most successful for that child, it can be hugely beneficial because that information is lifelong. It can guide them forever. When you do a DNA test, if it is comprehensive enough, there is no need to do it again. I mean, you have the DNA data there for you. So unless you do like a really small sampling of DNA, then I would suggest you do a more comprehensive testing in the future. But doing a DNA test, you can, if you're concerned about identity or anything that could happen in the future, use a pseudonym. You don't have to use their name. And I mean, I've done so many DNA tests for clients that there's no way in the world they'd ever know who's who. um, and not only that, but the testing that I use never has identifiers. They have a number. And most companies do this where they have a number. They may use the data for research to better understand the percentages, let's say. So it's almost like a broad sweeping what percentages of the population have this particular DNA SNP. They will have that information if you say, yes, you're welcome to use my information. But that's about the extent of what they use it for. I mean, they don't know what your symptoms are, so they can't really judge that. They don't know, uh, even where you live or who you are unless you give them that information because it's all done by a serial number. So anyway, um, when it comes to a child, though, testing can be extremely beneficial if there are symptoms because you're not just guessing. You're actually able to give that your child the support that they need specifically for their body. And it is very empowering because imagine some of us don't have to. I've had, one of my children had a problem with iron deficiency when she was 18 months old. Well, at that point, I hadn't done DNA testing. I didn't even really know that we could do it. It was actually right about the time, it was just after the DNA had been sequenced in 2003. So I think it was 2004 when she was having this issue. So that research wasn't even available, but boy would I do it now for sure, because you can tell, why is she iron deficient, what's going on, is she not, is it not integrating into the cells, or is it a problem that her body is um, not producing it, or holding on to it, what's going on. And then of course there's the issue with iron, that your body doesn't release it properly, and then you get overwhelmed with iron. So and then it's still not used properly, so the signals are all crossed. When you look at DNA, you're better able to identify where the efficiencies and inefficiencies are in the body. And it's not a determining factor. It's not saying, oh, this child is going to have this problem, or this person, even, as an adult, we're not saying, oh, you're definitely going to experience this disease because you have this gene. If it was that one for one, imagine how easy it would be to resolve illnesses. But what it can tell us is, it can tell us that the body isn't processing a particular nutrient efficiently. And if we're not processing certain nutrients, down the road that can result in disease, because we need to have B12 and vitamin D and vitamin C and all of those. I mean, just the complement of all of our organs functioning it relies on the resources that we have access to every meal. And so we want to make sure that our bodies are efficiently processing those things. So yeah, I don't think there is an age limit, honestly. I believe someday we will all know this and embrace it. And I believe that when children are born, we will automatically do a DNA test. That's what I vote for anyway. Okay. Um, let's see. Any questions related to that or of your own? Sorry, I just don't want to miss any opportunities if I'm just spouting off with ideas. I want to make sure your questions are answered. Okay. Well, anytime you come off mute, I will see, and then I will give you the floor. I'll jump to the next question, though. The next question was, how could DNA help me better understand high cholesterol? Okay, so high cholesterol is a tricky thing, because we automatically think of it as the demon, because of the way that it's represented in the media and in the medical community. But cholesterol is really, really important. It's super important for our brain health. It's really important for carrying all of our fats, making sure that we have a good balance of nutrition in our bodies and that we're able to utilize things. So automatically reducing cholesterol is not the go-to, in my view. What we want to make sure is that if we have cardiac issues in our history, in our health history, our personal health history, or in our family history, we do want to be aware of our cholesterol and our homocysteine. We absolutely need to test homocysteine to know better what's going on in our bodies. So from a lab perspective, that's super valuable. We want to look at LDL and HDL as well as total cholesterol, because we want to make sure that HDL is supported. HDL is a lot more supportive of our bodies than the LDL. So if our LDL is elevated, there are a lot of natural ways we can address it. But looking at our DNA can help us understand where's the miss, like where are we having problems? Are we overproducing cholesterol? Are we not managing it well and eliminating it as the body is supposed to? If we're not utilizing it and shipping it to the right places, like the brain is made of like 60% fat. So the brain uses cholesterol, which is fat, and it really relies on it. And that's why what you're starting to see in the media, there are connections between statins and dementia. And it's huge. And it's not going away because more and more people are being prescribed statins. So you get leg pains, you get headaches, you get memory loss, memory issues, and memory loss. And it's just frustrating because the connection is there, but there's a lot of, it's like plausible deniability. They don't want to talk about it because then they'd have to admit it. So what I would ask is for everyone to like really look at their family history and see what is the incidence of high cholesterol, of heart disease, and start looking at liver, even. What is your liver function? And better understand. I mean, the liver is absolutely paramount when it comes to managing cholesterol. So we want to make sure that it's not a fatty liver that we're dealing with instead of an actual cholesterol issue. Also, I would push back on what are your actual levels because high cholesterol is now being touted as over 100 for LDL. And that is not a real thing. Like that is like I had somebody come to me just the other day who said that he was put on a statin long time ago, but he's still being told that he has high cholesterol. His LDL was 66. That's not high. So I'm concerned because he is having memory issues now. And we need to have the fat. So going on a more natural approach, like going on a supplement that's going to support your body, support your heart health. CoQ10 is an absolute must if you're on a statin. It absolutely has to be in the mix because statins will draw down your CoQ10 just as rapidly or more rapidly than drawing down your cholesterol. So definitely make sure you have the support on board. You don't want to have dementia symptoms and not be able to reverse it. I'm not saying it isn't reversible, but there are times where we get beyond that point, sadly. I used to own Peak Brain Performance here in Columbus, Ohio, and it was all about brain health. And I had some clients that it was really sad. I mean, I had a couple clients in their 40s and early 50s that had been on statins, and yeah, it was not a good situation. And when one of them did do DNA testing at one point, and I was able to see why it wasn't a good thing and how we could, have supported the body in a better way, but too many years had gone by on that statin, and I don't know that it was I don't know that the body could uptake again at that point because the doctors were super reluctant to go off of the statin. Eventually she did, but it's rough. It can be really hard. And I appreciate that the doctors are trying to help us. They really are. It's just there's a lot more information we can gain from our DNA and really understand our personal needs. And they just don't have the time and the bandwidth to go into all of that. So that's where I invite you to do that. So you learn about your own body, and then you have the information to share with your practitioners. And you have the ability, when you are faced with a symptom, to look at what the root cause is. And that's really where the magic happens. I don't see anybody coming off mute. So I will jump to the next question. Okay, question. I have digestive issues. Where should I start if I want to do a personalized approach? Okay, so with digestive issues, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I go back to when did they start? What changed? Did you have an illness or like a virus of some sort? Have you been on a medication? Is there something that changed in your environment? Did you move? Is there more stress? What's going on with your body and with, in terms of your support? If things have really shifted under your feet, we've got to get back to what really supports you and give you what is not just a quick fix, but is actually going to resolve the issue. So I would say with digestive issues, is it elimination issues? Is it a sensation in your abdomen where you feel sick when you eat, or you just feel like you're not processing foods? Have you changed your diet lately? There are so many great things that we can do to figure it out, even before we look at DNA. When we have our DNA, we are able to then look at what it is that are like what foods we are able to process most efficiently, and where we if we might have uh something kind of some kind of backlash because of a particular food we are eating, or a supplement that we might need to give us extra support. I would also look at gut health. If there's been a recent illness or medication, I want to look at what is the microbiome likely experiencing. We don't necessarily have to test the microbiome, although it's not a bad idea. It's just sometimes the tests, they're getting better, but the tests aren't all that conclusive sometimes. And so we're just looking at a bunch of data and we don't know what to do with it. I've done a lot of research on the microbiome, though, and there are certain strains of bacteria that can be really useful when we're dealing with a particular symptom or a particular overgrowth of a bacteria. Like, if we have SIBO or if we have H. pylori, it's important to be able to understand that relationship between all of those bacteria and be able to support the body. So understanding the symptoms is really important. And then being able to understand or recognize the opportunity to eat more of more fiber or certain foods that complement what your needs are, really, really fulfill what your needs are. And then, of course, with digestive issues, if there are elimination issues, we want to make sure you don't have any prolonged constipation or diarrhea, because with constipation, a lot of people can experience issues that they're told that they have to have organs removed, which we've got to really start paying attention. If we have, any kind of gallbladder issues, if we have any kind of appendix issues, um, we really need to be paying attention, because if we're constipated frequently or any prolonged period of time, it puts our organs at risk, and we need to address it. There are some great things that we can do. You don't want to overdo it with fiber. You want to gradually introduce it. And you also don't want to be giving yourself like kind of that milk of magnesia treatment where you're just giving yourself all of this magnesium that doesn't absorb and then carries right through, because it's going to carry everything out, and it can cause problems with uh, your hydration and your electrolytes. So you want to make sure there's that balance. There are more gentle approaches to doing it, making sure, there's like diatomaceous earth, food grade diatomaceous earth you can take um, internally to help regulate your system. I've had some people who have both situations. I've had some clients that have constipation that diatomaceous earth works like a charm for regularity. And then I've had people who have diarrhea that it works great. So it's a great binder, but it also can help the body really regulate. So, but yeah, definitely looking at digestive issues and what is going on specifically, how long it's been going on, and again, what has worked well for you in the past, and how can we give you the support ongoing. Okay, I have um, a question here. I have shortness of breath and can't breathe deeply. What can I do to improve? So, the first thought is breathing exercises for sure. And what I mean by that is even taking a breath and timing it. So, let's say you take in a 4-second breath, you hold it for a second or two. And then as you're exhaling, and it sounds counterintuitive, but the exhale is kind of the secret because when you're exhaling more slowly, you're retaining air for a longer period of time. And it's giving the messaging and it's giving your body the opportunity to retain that oxygen and actually use it. But what I would suggest is taking a deep breath in through your nose for a count of 4. Sometimes you can increase it, it's different for everybody, but then hold it for a second if you can. And then as you're breathing out, purse your lips or just keep your lips kind of close together. And then allow the air to seep out slowly. And you can count. Usually it's for a count of 6 if you've done an in breath of a count of 4. And as you're breathing out, this is another trick, hum. So when you hum, it actually helps you produce more nitric oxide, which allows you to uh, take in more oxygen. So we're, I don't know if the problem is lung expansion. If you've had an injury, like I've worked with some people that have had broken ribs, and that can cause restriction where you just get so used to having really shallow breathing that it becomes a habit. So we need to break that habit. But if there are other physical limitations or reasons why that breathing is shallow, we can talk about it. You can reach out to me and we can talk about it. But staying hydrated is also really important because it helps the mucosa of the lungs. And it just doesn't allow for the stagnation as much if you're hydrated. And then vitamin D is also really important because vitamin D helps to keep the inflammation of the lungs down. I don't know if inflammation is a part of this equation, but it certainly can be. And that can cause a sense of restriction. So I would definitely look at those as options. That slow exhale and the humming. And even if you initially find yourself counting only to 3 because that in breath is so shallow, fine, do that. And then the external, like out breath might be 4, a count of 4 or 5. And then you'll find as you're doing that day to day, it will get better and you'll have better capacity. But again, I don't know the physical limitations or any of the other details. And we are definitely unique individuals. So I'm happy to answer your questions if you want to reach out through the direct messaging. What other questions are there? Even questions about what we've talked about. I'm happy to answer. Just checking to make sure I'm not missing anything. No questions?
Can you please put in the chat the supplement that you were talking about for the gut health?
The diatomaceous earth?
Yeah. It was a
Sure.
D word. But yeah, it's like that D word. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, I know, I know. It's yeah, let me do that. Let me so yeah, so diatomaceous earth is it's probably gonna flip me around here for a sec, but diatomaceous earth, you're in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're going to have it, you want to get food grade diatomaceous earth um, because it's very often used in pools as a filter. So you'll find it, but you want it to be food grade for sure. Um, and it is usually, I recommend having it in the house for even if somebody has food poisoning, it's a great thing to have on hand. Let's see, there you go. It's great to have if you have any kind of like, let's say that you eat something and you just don't feel good and you're like, oh, that was probably bad, and you don't have any recourse. I do like activated charcoal, but I will say that activated charcoal has some backlash if you use it for too long of a time because it it grabs onto your minerals so tightly. And if you take it, so like if somebody tells me, I've had clients call and say, my daughter or I have food poisoning, what should we do? The first thing I'm going to say is activated charcoal because it like grabs it and it takes it. As soon as the major symptoms, I won't get graphic, but the major symptoms of food poisoning start to dissipate, I would say then you shift to diatomaceous earth because it's much more gentle on the system and it's much more balancing. It's not going to just grab everything. When you take these things, though, you want to take it away from food if you intend to keep the nutrition of that food. So you want to take it at least an hour or two after you've eaten so that it doesn't just sweep away your nutrition because it's that effective. Um, People who feel that they might have parasites, we all have parasites, sorry to say, but if you feel like you've been exposed to something, you've eaten raw, like sushi, raw meat, raw fish, anything like that, or I mean, we can get it from vegetables, we can get parasites. So, um, doing a cleanse, either quarterly or every 6 months is a good idea. And diatomaceous earth is pretty gentle. Um, Another one I really like is Pectosol C. Pectosol C is another good cleanse. It's not the same as diatomaceous earth um, and activated charcoal, but it has its purpose when it comes to a cleanse. It's really good. And if anybody has like my whole reason for those of you who don't know me, I have a terrible family history of cancer. My mom died when she was 29. My dad was 53. This is why I do this work. But Pactisol C is a great thing to have. And I actually do it every quarter. I do a month every quarter of every either morning or evening away from food. I take Pectosol C in about 8 ounces of water. It's just really, really helpful for the body to cleanse on a regular basis, and it's so gentle, like you don't even really know that what's going on. I also have recommended it to people who have been diagnosed, and it is super impressive in the way that it can support the body. So yeah, I think when it comes to digestion, we have a balancing act of knowing like we want to be able to absorb our nutrients, and we also need to be able to make sure those nutrients don't hang around too long in the colon. So we want to make sure that we are recognizing where things are kind of going wrong. And it might be that in our nutrition, in our diet, we just don't have that perfect balance that our body needs. And we can work through that pretty, easily once we figure that out. But it's a balancing the diet for our needs and then identifying what it is that just may be holding us up if we're not eliminating regularly. Anybody have any, even a health topic that you are curious about? We have about 12 more minutes. I mean, we certainly can end early, but I'm happy to be available if anybody has questions or topics that you want to hear about. Well, if you don't have any questions, I am super appreciative that you were able to be on today. I really, really, really appreciate that you made it and made time for it. And I will have the recording. So if you are interested in the recording or if you know anybody that this could benefit, I would love for you to share it with them because that's the whole goal, right? Oh, you're very welcome. Very welcome. And I would, just love to be a resource for people. So I am going to be doing this every month, and I will just, post it in on my personal page and post it everywhere so that you know when it's coming. And if you have any questions leading up to that, I will be glad if you want to just post them um, or message me with them. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great day.